Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kiro Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show and thanks.
Hello, welcome, Maz, to our CRM Success Show recording today. You're going to be under the spotlight in our two special episodes, where we will interview each other. So, welcome.
Oh, thank you, man. It's going to be good. It's probably a long time in the making. So, looking forward to it.
32 episodes later. Yeah, 32 episodes later, here we are. So Maz, obviously people have got to know you and your background to an extent through the last 12, 18 months we've been going with the podcast. But why don't you give our listeners a quick overview of your background, starting out in the DBA space and then moving into Salesforce, what that journey looked like for you?
So I'm going to age myself a bit here. I'm not as young as I used to be. So I've been in tech now probably close to 20, almost 25 years, right? I graduated college 98 in the height of the .com boom. I always knew I wanted to work with data. Believe it or not, highly because I thought it would be more stable. At the time, you're talking the late 90s, the guy, Edgar Todd, basically invented relational databases, and that's all they've been since the 60s, basically, in terms of databases. I mean, I'm somewhat exaggerating here, but basically they were the only game in town. And then that quickly changed, though that didn't obviously work out as they planned the data space as continues to evolve. So I started off doing DBA work after the .com bust and 9/11. It was not so easy to find a job. I had some connections and ended up getting a job in consulting, actually working with my uncle who had a small shop. So I did ERP systems for a few years, and then in 2008ish, I think I joined a CRM company. Didn't even know what CRM was. It was actually a sales logic shop, not Salesforce. So I was with those guys for a bunch of years. They had some issues, went bankrupt, some buyouts, all the stuff you would expect working for small firms. I went to Weight Watchers a couple of years where I was working on Dynamics. And then I joined a smallish, mid-sized Salesforce shop called Red Kite. I've always been working in financial services, even previously when doing CRM systems. So yeah, they took on a very big project for a very large hedge fund. I joined as a project manager. There was a lot of data components to that project. Originally, they weren't bidding on the data components; they were only bidding on Salesforce work. I convinced them to bid on the data work as well. So we ended up taking that on too, and then I ended up full time on the project for the first year that I worked there. And then I basically continued down that path of being a quasi Salesforce expert who knows data really well. And then you kind of, by this point, probably an expert in both. I hopped around a little bit within the Salesforce space through a series of acquisitions, which then you want to leave because you're not so crazy about the acquisitions. Met a lot of really, really great people. And then I started Gluon in 2019, which is really a data consultancy that specializes in partnering with Salesforce SIs, particularly smaller, mid-sized SIs that do really, really great Salesforce work, but may struggle with any kind of data work, usually batch ETL based, because Apex work or point-to-point integrations will often fall in their wheelhouse that they can handle. Data warehousing, analytics, did a lot of CRM analytics for a while, Tableau, MuleSoft, all of that kind of stuff that a smaller shop may not have the expertise. Do we partner with them and we white label our services? And then it's been working out great. And then about 2 years ago, I partnered with a really, really good friend of mine. He was working at a management consulting firm, helping them with basically being their CRM arm. They were outsourcing a lot of the implementation work. They would do management consulting type work, outsource the build work to third parties, and then some of the projects didn't go so great, particularly on the data side of things. So he brought me in to help them with that, and then we ended up partnering up and kind of becoming a firm that works with not just so Gluon would work with a Salesforce SI, High Meadow Solutions, who I'm partnered with Brian Hyman, my partner. We focus on partnering heavily with management consulting firms, and then that work in with DRM, and then we can help them with kind of implementation on that. Also heavily in financial services, RIAs, family offices, wealth managers, that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Fantastic.
that's my past 25 years in like 4 minutes.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I think what's really cool as well, obviously pivoting to the Salesforce piece, you've worked with some good brand name partners in there, like Silverline, for example, Capgemini, through the acquisition of Red Kite, Liquid Hub, and then Capgemini obviously acquired Liquid Hub, Plative, another good partner there as well. So was that choice, or was just fortunate? You kind of stumbled. Were you proactively looking for partners? Like there's a lot of partners. So like, how did you know at the time? Was it just a gamble that these might make it and they might become something, or was there a bit more method in the madness selecting who you wanted to work for, I guess, and with?
So I'm a big proponent of your job security is more so based on your ability to find another job than it is on your current role. When I'm looking for a job, at least when I used to be, now I just don't look for jobs because I'm self-employed. But at the time it was, am I going to be happy here? Do I like the people I'm working for? Particularly the person I would be reporting to. What's their personality like? What's their management style like? Is it a place that I can thrive, that I can add value? I tend to like smaller shops because you get to do a lot more and really have an impact on the business as a whole. While as where you end up at a Capgemini, you're basically pigeonholed into a project. At the end of the day, you're not much more than a line on a spreadsheet of how much you're billing, unless obviously you go more into the partner track, where then it's how much business you're bringing in. Smaller boutique firms seem to be more in terms of, I want to deliver really, really high quality product. They want to understand the business. It's much more high touch. They get invested in the projects because they're thinking in terms of, I want a success story. I want references so that I can continue to grow. It's just a very different mindset in terms of how you're kind of delivering and how you run your projects. Anytime you have founders directly involved in projects, just the standard is much higher. People who aren't pulling their weight for whatever reason, be it a talent issue or just a commitment issue or whatever, they get weeded out relatively quick. Whereas with larger firms, they squeak by. And the saying, A players hire other A players. Founders are generally A players. They try to keep A player teams. Whereas the larger shops tend to be, more filled with, let's say, B players who are hiring C players. Again, just my personal experience or how I tend to view things. But obviously, there are some very good people at a lot of the larger shops. So this is obviously highly generalistic. But yeah. So I tended to look for just to summarize, smaller shops. I like boutique shops. Give you opportunity to impact the business as a whole. And then highly, am I going to like the person I'm working with? I got to work with them 8 hours a day. I'm not going to work for someone I hate. I can't stand being around. So yeah, super, super important.
How many 8-hour days did you have in consulting, Maz?
Believe it or not, quite a bit.
Yeah.
So what happens is what happens is you're allocated at 40 hours, often 35 in consulting. But then you run into issues. But if you're working in a good shop and you're highly capable, you tend to keep that stuff under control, and it goes well. So what'll happen is you're pulled onto a project, often because it's struggling, and this happens more with PMs probably than on the other roles. It happens a lot with data too, though, believe it or not, right? So you're put into a project because the project is struggling, it's behind budget, it's late, and there's a lot of cleanup to do. So you get a stressful few weeks, but then hopefully you're able to turn things around. And then after that, it's generally smooth sailing on that particular project. One of the downsides about being with a firm for a long time, call it a downside, but it's just the fact of life, is that particularly smaller shops, is every time you're placed on a project, you make relationships with that client. Um, then you know their product, you know their business, you know their implementation, and then the company, the SI, will sign a support agreement that can go on indefinitely, sometimes 5 years out, and then you're constantly pinged on these projects. So you're working on a core project, and then you're have, like, no joke, easily 10 other um, projects that you're kind of associated to or on call, right? In case there's some issue, something they want to discuss, whatever it is. And those are very difficult to estimate the time, and they end up consuming a lot, of your time. And then as you move up, you get more into, let's say, the director level. Then you're dealing with a lot of working on the business type stuff, right? Strategy work. But at the end of the day, particularly at a smaller shop, that stuff tends to take a back seat to client work. And two, they generally aren't making you push weekends to put together a corporate strategy in a boutique firm. That tends to not happen. So, yeah. So besides, like, you might have, an offsite, or you might have like we used to do, it's very common, like a senior management or leadership Sunday, because they don't want to pull away from the right. So you'd have that on occasion. And then obviously you have your launches and that kind of stuff, where you might be working nights and weekends, particularly with the go live and a big data migration or a big data project that has to happen off hours. But if your projects are managed right, you're working with a good firm, you're generally not burning that much overtime.
And I guess if you are, that's where things like utilization bonuses come into play, and maybe you're actually incentivized to be billable more hours anyway, right? Especially the boutique, smaller firms, that seems to be a common model, right?
Yeah, but so the bonuses, for billing bonuses, they and I mean, like, look, just do the math. It doesn't pay. Nobody's doing it. You end up making, I don't know, $30 an hour for your overtime hours. It doesn't pay. Um, particularly either if you're a highly paid consultant. You're doing it because you have a sense of obligation and a commitment to doing quality work. It's nice, right? They're showing your appreciation, but nobody's doing that for the overtime pay, unless you're independent, which is a different story. Because independence, right? You try to make up the downtime, and you don't know what you're going to do between projects sometimes, right? So you want to complete a project. Ideally, you get on a project immediately after that. Sometimes these projects are 8 months long. You can't line something up 8 months out, and you always have this fear of downtime. So you try to maximize, and then at the same time, you're nervous about not just it drying up. Yeah, you're basically nervous about your next contract, but you're afraid that if you turn down work today, they go to a competitor, and then they don't come back the next time of a project. So you're nervous about telling people no, because you want to keep that relationship open, and there's a reliability piece to that of I'm your guy. I want you to come to me. But if I'm your guy and I want you to come to me, I have to be available when you call, even if it might be tight. So, yeah, you tend to work more hours as a freelancer. But again, at least you're paid for that, like you said.
Right, right. I guess on the topic of maybe pros and cons, boutique versus enterprise partners, I wanted to get your thoughts on the notion of sales, and particularly as an individual contributor, not a equity owner or anything like that. Do you feel, or did you feel, there was more of a focus and emphasis on upsell, cross sell, converting contracts to managed services in a smaller shop versus a bigger shop?
No, it's the reverse, I believe.
That was your experience, yeah.
So I haven't, keep in mind, even though I worked for Capgemini, we weren't fully integrated by the time I
Right.
left. So it was still running more like a boutique shop. But I've spoken to enough people at the larger shops. They're looking at these numbers much more closer. Um, Sometimes in a way that I personally feel is somewhat unfair. If I'm hiring like a kid, he's 2 years out of school, he's energetic, he's trying to learn the tech, trying to get up on industry speed. Um, and then, he had the month on the bench and you're like, why are you on the bench? Go out and drum up some business. To me, it seems unfair, right? It's
Mhm.
like, we have departments, you have a sales division, you have your implementers. I feel like it should be the sales guy's job to get work. Now, granted, sure, you don't have work for him. Eventually, he's going to get let go because, right? How long can the company absorb that for? But it seems somewhat unfair to blame the individual contributor when that's not their role. Now, that being said, they should be, and this is just part of being a good consultant, is helping them look for ways to improve, um, right? Keeping track of requests that get kicked out of the project. So we're running a project working towards a timeline. All of these out of scope requests get back. You'll see 400 posts on LinkedIn about telling people no, right? Scope creep,
Mhm.
scope creep. You gotta stop the scope creep. But that doesn't mean you take that and you say no. What you do is you put it in a backlog and you mark it as phase two. And then your project is running down. You're like, hey, you remember all of those stuff that we said, let's deal with it later. Later is coming up. Let's start planning for that, right? And that becomes very effective. So the what you want to do is have a relationship with the clients or the projects that you're on, that they view you as the trusted advisor. Um, you're not pushing work just for the point of getting hours, but you're helping them do um, what's right for their business, and you have a lot of this information to feed those conversations because you've been working with them so closely for months for months on end. So that's probably the place where it goes. But yeah, if at the end of the day they say, our board pulled our budget for next year, are you going to blame the consultant for that? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think that idea goes to your point around job security, right? There are factors in your control as a consultant that you can support your own job security. That is one great example that you shared. Being proactive is another, and I think internally networking in some of these partners, whether they're 50 people or their practice is 5,000 people, right? There are other projects, and making sure that the leaders, delivery managers, delivery leaders, partners, etc., know who you are, what skill set you have, and being proactive around building those relationships. When you do have a project that goes quiet or unexpectedly finishes, there's already a lukewarm relationship somewhere where they might be able to leverage your expertise, right?
Yeah,
Any
100%. You want people
any
to
other
want you
advice?
on their team. Yeah, you want people to want you on their team. So the larger consulting firms operate like that. A lot of um, teams building their own teams from within the talent pool of the company, right? So you get put on the bench. Sometimes it's up to you to find another project, networking within. So if you have a good reputation, people are going to want you, and then those relationships obviously last. When not just when I started Gluon, but throughout the years, that's been my primary source of new business, has been relationships with people who I've worked in the past who know and recommend me. By far, my biggest source of leads is, hey, you're facing this problem. I know the guy for you. He's not going to let you down. Give Dave a
Yeah.
call. Yeah, by far. A lot of them are, someone I've worked with at one of my clients. They left, right, on good terms or in bad terms, and then they went to another SI. I maintained a relationship with them, connected on LinkedIn. Anytime I'm working with someone and they're leaving, I try to keep in touch, ask them where they're going. Say, hey, look, if you ever need help, I'm around. No pressure. And then it's a long game. There.
So organic outreach, organic sales, congratulating them on a new job promotion, etc. I've seen you, even in the past, happy birthday reminders, that kind of thing, right? Just the personal touch points. I think one of the best bits of advice I heard, it wasn't my idea, so I can't take credit, but was for, let's say you're coming from an SI, you've predominantly done your career in SI, is every project that you're involved in, put the two or three key people on that project in a spreadsheet, right? Name of client, ABC, Dave Masri, Kiro, Jeff, right? And then just track those people wherever they go, so that when you do go out on your own as an independent, let's say you've been doing that 5 years, you're working on 15, 20 projects a year, you've got 100 companies and 300 points of contact that you could outreach, say, hey, you remember when I was your BA on this project in 2018? Well, this is what I've been up to since, and now I'm setting up on my own. This is what I can help you with. You're at this company. Do they need somebody like me, kind of thing, right? I think that advice is worth. I mean, it could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? You could, in new project work, because it's impossible to remember every single project that you've worked on in 10, 15 years as a consultant.
Yeah, again, ideally you want them reaching out to you, because there's so many components, right? It's have to be the right person, they have to be decision maker, they have to, or at least know the decision maker and have some kind of pull with the decision maker. That means they have to be in good standing at their company. They need to actually have a need. So, even if 1,000 people, if you try to reach out to all of them, maybe it gets lost in their email, like who knows. The success rate is much lower than you're on top of mind. So it's really trying to stay on top of mind, and building relationships. I think that's the bonus of trying to post quasi regularly on platforms like LinkedIn, is because people will see it like, oh, that's right, I remember Dave, and they don't forget who you are. So that when the need arises, they reach out. Because again, I'm not a marketing expert. So, but let's say you have this list of 1,000 leads, people that you've actually worked with. I think scientifically, your network can't really be more than 150 personal relationships. It's just not possible to maintain it. So but let's say you do have a list of 1,000, like, okay, so you'll send out 1 mail blast, 2 mail blasts. How many mail blasts can you do, to the 1,000 people? So yeah, and also you don't want a relationship where it's like, you only call me when you need me.
Yeah.
A lot of these conversations are just start off with, hey Dave, I need some advice, or believe it or not, can you talk to my kid? He wants to break into the industry, or this kind of stuff, right? Just stuff that you would do for friends, like literally things you would do for friends. And then sometimes that turns into something 2 years later, and sometimes it doesn't. But you never know. It's just a lot of that, and truth be told, it's very friendly, and it kind of makes the day a little bit more enjoyable, catching up with people that you care about, and and you have a good personal relationship with, though. I think that.
Yeah, I think it's going into those conversations with genuine intent to help, versus I might get some business out of you. If you do, it's a bonus, great, fantastic. Mm-hmm. But you're trying to add value before asking, at least, right? And I think you touched on the kind of LinkedIn posting, informative, educational, right? And also that kind of shifts us into the idea of building a brand and what you want to be known for. So I want to ask you a little bit about your book. So for those that aren't aware, Dave has published a book. It's on Amazon called Developing Data Migrations and Integrations with Salesforce. It covers patterns, trends, best practice, etc. I guess, why did you decide on that as a topic initially? And once you decided on the topic, what were the next steps in terms of capturing that content?
So I had a lot of the content going in. So what happened was I was currently, at the time, I was working at Silverline. My boss was this guy named Eric Nelson. A lot of people probably in the ecosystem know him. And Silverline had a program where you would set your goals, your corporate goals. A lot of companies do this, particularly smaller ones. But they pushed you, which was nice, to like put on some personal goals. So this with that is like my personal goals list, always something I wanted to do. By this time, I joined Silverline to help them kind of, build out a data team over there. I mean, they already had a data team, but a little bit more structure around it, I would say. And I had training material that I've already done this at Red Kite, at CAP. So I had a lot of the process down. I always wanted to write a book, and then what I did was I went onto Amazon, who's selling Salesforce books. Apress had at the time was the only player in town. Anyone who's worked in tech heard of Apress. I wanted a named publisher rather than self-publishing. So I went on their website and said, okay, how do I submit a proposal? And then I got a response, almost immediately from them. They thought it was an incredibly strong proposal. And then by nature, like it just very organized, because I had training programs, and then I basically followed that and added a bunch of earlier content, which is a lot of more general consulting advice. Because, right, to be a good contributor in anything, you need to be good on the softer skills too, right? And I didn't feel I would be doing yourself a good service if I tell you, oh, you just got to put together, mapping document, build these pipes, and either your basic patterns to do a synchronization, right? Or how do you detect duplicates, or dealing with timestamp issues, or all of this kind of stuff, without giving you the underlying importance of planning your process end to end, because that stuff gets just utterly lost. It's funny. I have the section on planning. So I go through like a list of 40 best practices, and literally the first one is have a plan. That's the first breakfast. Is just have a plan. And then and like the first line in that section is something along the lines of, it always amazes me how many people don't plan anything in their life. Like nothing. They don't plan their weekend, they don't plan their vacations, let alone a big project. And it just goes miles. Like having any kind of plan already puts you probably ahead of the game in terms of the average performance. A lot of people, what they think is a plan today is not. It's a loose timeline if you're lucky, right? That's not a plan.
What should a good plan consist of, in your opinion?
So obviously it depends on what you're planning, right?
Yep.
So
let's say a data migration project, because that's obviously the topic of the book and your area of expertise.
Integrations as well.
Integrations, yeah.
So the data migrations, it's okay. Right, I need a fairly concise list of activities, right? I need to get the source data out. How am I going to do that? What's the, let's say, the constraint over there, or any risk in that process? Am I reliant on the client to get that data? How are they going to deliver that data? Are they going to give me files? Are they going to give me direct access? Do I need to connect to the API to pull it? Are they millions of records that can take 3 days to export? Or is it something that can be exported in an hour, right? So one, how am I going to do my extraction? How am I going to do that repeatedly? Okay, the next part is mapping it, understanding the source. I need to be able to know, right, analyze what data is available to me in the source, what data needs to be in the target, how do those line up? That's essentially what the mapping process is, right? And then how do I deal with missing data? Do I need all of it? Am I willing to compromise? Then you have your testing plan. Um, I personally, I'm a proponent of doing a full load for UAT, the repeatability of it, and then we have our go live weekend, right? And all of the things we need to understand, where are risks in each of these? What's the timing look like? How we expect it to progress, and how do I hit those timelines, right? So for me, it's very common. Let's say I'm doing 30 objects. We're going to try to get on week 1 4 objects mapped or 2 objects mapped. Week 2, I having somebody who's coding that integration, coding the transformations, coding the load, coding the extract because I like it wholly automated from extraction to load. Um, Maybe I have someone else working on the next set of mappings, or right while
Mhm.
while they're coding the first set, and it's kind of like a waterfall at the same time. So it loosely follows the sprints, the build sprints. So we like to do if the implementation team is building, accounts and contacts, we're doing the data analysis at the same time, so that we can um, give them an input. So what'll happen is I get my data out of their legacy system, um, and then we'll try to do that mapping, and then I'll take that back to the a business analyst or the system analyst who's building the Salesforce implementation and say, hey, look, did you realize that you had 12 opportunity types, and that when you were sitting in the meeting, they only told you of 3 of them, right? And it could be that they're legacy. They don't
Mm.
work with those anymore, but you still got to deal with the legacy data. Um, and then the question is, okay, how do we convert that? A lot of times, believe it or not, what happens is the legacy system had 4 or 5 migrations to it, and each one of those records look different. So you got to deal with it. And if you sit down and talk to them, some of these people weren't even there when that legacy system was there. Don't necessarily work with that data. Um, so never trust, right? Kind of what you're being told. You always validate it by looking at source data. So it's tough to explain this without like showing it on paper. But a plan needs to be detailed. It's got to have your milestones. It got to have your dates. It got to track your risks. Um, and you got to know what your plan of attack is, right? Again, how am I going to do this export? What is the risk of doing it that way? Do I need to POC it out to mitigate that risk and know that it's not a risk? And what are my alternatives, right? So all of these kind of steps need to be planned out.
Perfect. And I think the most important one there is what you're playing against, right? In terms of these, what's legacy, right? And it might not be willingly not shared. It could, like to your point, it could be the company you're working with, the team replaced the other team 5-10 years ago. It was an external vendor. They got no idea. So I think that's valuable advice in itself. Knowing what you're up against in the first place, right? Almost doing like an audit before you start to formalize and put a concrete plan together probably is a good idea. So I know from knowing you for 7-8 years now, I know you're a bit shy when it comes to self promotion. So I'm going to do it for you. So the book again is called Developing Data Migrations and Integrations with Salesforce, Patterns and Best Practices. It's available on Amazon. I mean, it's a meaty book, right? 370 pages. And I know a lot of companies will offer some kind of L&D, fun stipend to go out and get books and certs and all that kind of stuff. So definitely get this on your shopping list for the 2026 your annual credit. So definitely head over to Amazon for that. But so one of the things I wanted to touch on a little bit. So obviously you had a lot of content, but it's not a quick 30-page book either, like I just said. So how long did it take from reaching out to the publisher and getting it published? How long did that take? And I guess obviously that was 7 years ago now. So has a lot of the content changed, or in your opinion, is still is there a 2.0 version on the way, for example, or is a lot of it still relevant for today's landscape?
So keep in mind, when it's a patterns and practices book, it's not a coding book. So it's not going to change. The Salesforce data landscape has changed a tremendous amount. So the book was published in 2019. Um, and literally, like 2 days after it hit the presses, they acquired MuleSoft, which is like, but again, the patterns and practices book, so it didn't bother me much. I'm not, I do have a chapter. The first chapter of the book is understanding relational databases, because you need to understand Salesforce object model. People call Salesforce a relational database, and I kind of go through on why it's really not, and how they're similar and why they call it that. But again, it's more patterns and practices as opposed to a coding book. So it's teaching you the how, the why, as opposed to a specific tool or a specific language. So in that way, it's timeless, and probably applies to, or could apply to, a lot more than just Salesforce, right? Um, but yeah, I think anyone who reads it would get a lot out of it. But there's a lot more, particularly in the later chapters. I have a chapter that I just go through every single kind of like integration you could potentially do. Um, from like an app integration, embedding screens, a more MuleSoft type, right? API triggering code as opposed to a real-time pull, external objects, data loading, big objects, all of that kind of stuff, which is around the time. Now you throw in data cloud, LLMs obviously didn't exist at the time. MCP servers didn't exist at the time. But none of the stuff in there probably had gone away, but there's so much more content. Um, I'd love to write a version 2. They've asked me to write a version 2. A-Press has reached out a couple of times. I just don't have the bandwidth. Originally, it took me 10 months to write the initial version. They say to put out a second version, you want about 30% new content. There's so much more to do, right? So they acquired MuleSoft since the book was published. MuleSoft and Tableau were both acquired. I think Datadog or some of these types. But anyway, they spun up Data Cloud also. So just those three, I think each of them have their own set of volumes of books. I would add maybe a chapter on the patterns or the reason for those types of platforms. MuleSoft, they probably covered BI, not as much, but a little bit, I think, in terms of the star schema, reporting. I don't remember exactly. But Data Cloud would be an interesting one to add a whole set of chapters on there.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I know this was a personal goal of yours, and I also know at the same time you're not naive enough to think this is going to be a bestseller and retire you, be a full-time author, right? So how did you go into this? I guess what version of success? What did success look like for you when publishing this book? Was it by number of books sold? Was it by number of reviews? Was it by number of people that reached out because of the book and that turned into projects won? How did you quantify that when you cast your mind back 6 years ago? You were about to publish this book.
Believe it or not, I don't think I thought in terms of what would be successful. I did want to be like a top Salesforce selling book. Which I think it is. I don't really know. And believe it or not, the thing they're not easy to track. The contracts, are structured in a way where there are other avenues where you kind of just get like a flat rate, not a per book commission.
Okay.
So, for example, like Safari Books, or the Kindle Rent a Book, or they give a certain amount to libraries. So they're this kind of stuff, right? So I think for again, I'm sure these numbers have changed somewhat. So, they're going to list it on Safari Books, and anyone who has the Safari subscription, and then you get like a flat sum for that. And that's that, right? So it's hard to quantify the sales. And then they give you a statement every quarter or so. I don't know, the first year or two, maybe I tracked it, and I'm like, but I still get royalty checks now every quarter, a few $100, nothing crazy. So yeah, If I were to take the hours that I spent writing this book and convert that to independent consulting hours, like there's no contest. You would have made much, much, much more money
Yep.
actually working and billing. So it was definitely somewhat of a passion project. In terms of professional reputation, it definitely has helped. I don't know. I wouldn't say I've gotten any direct business from it, but what it definitely does is it definitely gives you a lot of credibility, right? So when you're talking to someone, right, they're generally not you're not going to get grilled in terms of how do I know you know what you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it gives you a lot of professional credibility, that kind of stuff. And without bragging, it's what right, it's well deserved, right? They can read the book, they can see your work, um, and yeah, the stuff takes expertise to do.
It's
So I think that's
it's
more of the
Yeah, I think it's a physical way to say, here you go. This is my book. Check it out, and all that's in my head and has been and more. Right? It's something tangible that people can see straight away when they get an outreach email or your name's passed on or whatever. Right?
yeah. The other part, which is also somewhat of an intangible, is um, I was very I was not someone who was heavy in social media prior to putting
Hmm.
out the book. Once I put out the book, like if I gotta promote it,
Right.
right? Because like what am I doing? So I started becoming more active on social media, and that kind of also did a bit help. Got a lot more comfortable with that kind of stuff. Definitely helped the sales, the book sales as well. So,
Yeah.
and then yeah, that helped obviously build your network because I had people reaching out. Hey, I have a question about this. Can I ask your advice? That kind of stuff, right? So that helps too.
It's a snowball effect. It's another tool that you can share along with for example, the meetups we used to do back in New York. This podcast, it's another thing that you can offer value to somebody by showing versus just pestering for business, right? So I think it all adds up, and it's maybe you can quantify it by actual book sales, but there's a value that you will never know. I mean, it's impossible to know, as well, right? So but I think it's great, and it's certainly something that separates you from others as well. And I know you're passionate about giving back to others and helping others and advice. So hopefully, those that do buy it, they can take away something from it and implement that into their business, and maybe it'll help them on their journey, right? So I know upskilling others is a big passion area of yours too. So maybe it allowed for you to do that in a way, right? At a larger scale, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, look, it's always nice to help people. It is a kind of way to help people at scale. So, and yeah, and it's a nice forum for it. I also started my blog because of it to talk
Yeah.
on peripheral topics, although I haven't been contributing to that as much recently. Also, it's been so busy.
So talk about a bit about the busyness. So you mentioned in the intro you have two companies that you're heavily involved in. So Gluon Digital and also High Meadow. I guess what are the two main what is the differentiator between the two? You touched on it briefly in the intro, but how do you determine what work goes to Gluon versus High Meadow? And I guess what advice would you give for others that might be thinking about setting up their own corporation? If you had to do this all again, what would you do differently? That type of stuff.
So, Gluon, like I said, we partner with SIs directly, right? Taking on their data work. High Meadow is primarily partnered with more management consulting type firms. We do a little bit direct Salesforce. They're doing more Salesforce, like real traditional Salesforce work with TAs, with FAs, with BAs, the whole nine yards. Heavily focused on, again, RIAs, wealth management, um, FinServ, right? Specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And Gluon is heavy data tech across all industries, whatever the SI may need. And they do the heavy lifting of all of the data work. And it's very much white labeled. That's how it differentiate the two of them. What was your follow-up question on?
Your I guess areas for if you had to go back and set up a company now, what things you wish you would know, right? Could be as basic as having an accountant ready to file taxes, or it could be investing more time in the sales efforts, or what things would you do differently if you had to do it again?
I'm learning a lot from my partner Brian Hyman on the High Meadow side. Gluon is solo, right? So Brian is much more, let's say, passionate about sales than I am, and I'm a little bit more passionate with the hardcore tech, right? So Gluon is very much, not that High Meadow's not, but it was very much a tech firm founded. Um, I had enough relationships. I had 2 clients on day one, right? Had 2 anchor clients, and I knew on day one I could match my day job salary. So I said, okay, no problem. I shut down. I started a company. It's not hard to start a company. So my advice, anyone doing this, is know your numbers. I mean, that's literally the basic thing, is know your numbers. If I'm going to quit my job and start a company, what do I need to bring in? How many hours do I got to work? What's my cost of acquisition, right? All of that kind of stuff. And can I make it through the first year? Can I make it through the first 2 years? When do I run into a problem? Do I have the savings to deal with whatever time I'm going to not have any income, right? Because mentally, it's a very different mindset working with an unsteady or unpredictable income. That's probably the hardest challenge. Um, my wife works for the government, so I was able to get her benefits through her, which was a big help. I didn't have to worry about health insurance for me, for my kids, right? So I knew I had that figured out. But the point is, I had to have that figured out, right? Setting up the corporation, like, it's so easy nowadays. Find yourself a decent accountant, and like, you can literally find the website and type it in and get your tax ID number in a day. And then basically keep meticulous books, track your expenses, track your revenue, track your time, right? So you know essentially what you're making. I mean, look, you're running a business. You need all the skills that it take to run a business from the operations side, not to mention the sales side, or you partner with someone who knows what they're doing. So on the High Meadow side, I'm acting as not at the operations, because we have a COO, but I'm acting as the kind of like the CFO as well, in terms of running all the books and running our numbers. Mostly because, I mean, I guess working with data, you're kind of just good at it. I also have a business degree. A lot of people don't know that. So I went to Baruch College here in the city, New York City. But originally I wanted to go into finance, but then I switched it. So I ended up getting a computer information degree, but it's a Bachelor of Business Administration. So I took the whole suite of business courses as well. And then working with boutique shops, you see how they operate. So you know how they operate, you know how they think. So yeah, I think it would be is, don't be scared of it. Don't make mountains of the small things. Like, for whatever reason, people get scared of the, like, oh, I gotta set up a corporation. Like, that's like, literally, it's easy. Like, you can go online and just do that. And then you're gonna need an accountant to help you with taxes. And the truth be told, at least here in the United States, it's the second year taxes that get complex, because the first year the government gives you so much leniency, right? It's like it was all new. They don't know when you made this money. So you can come and say something like, I started in November and I had a big contract and they paid me, so that's why I didn't pay any estimated taxes. And they don't know, and they're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But year two, they're going to say, yeah, but you knew from the year before, right? So you get a lot of leniency in year one, um, with the taxes. But other than that, it's like, really, it's not that difficult. I wouldn't even worry about, opening a company, like the legalities of it. It's more of, can I pay my bills in year one? Can I pay my bills in year two? Can I grow this business so that I'm making more than my full-time job? And how long will that take? What's my opportunity cost? And does that pay? And will I enjoy it? Right? Believe it or not, I never ever wanted to work for myself. It just kind of happened organically. What happened was, like you said before, I got into one of the higher, more senior level positions, happened to be a plaintiff. I was working a lot of hours, and it's like what am I doing? I can be doing this for myself if I'm going to work this kind of hours. So if you're ending up seeing yourself putting in a ton of work, and it's a lot more than a 9 to 5, and you can take those hours and put them to work for yourself and make at least the same, you might as well consider it. And then again, that's assuming you can deal with the stress of the non-consistent income, right? So if you're gonna work for yourself, you absolutely better be a saving type. You're not somebody who has money burning in your pocket to be spent, because you need to plan for the
The rainy
downtime.
day. Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I guess, when do you decide, or how do you decide what to delegate and hire somebody for versus take on yourself? Because I guess in that mindset, let's say you might have a good 9 months and then you haven't found a project for the rest of the 3 months, like zero income at all, but your business still has costs, right? You might decide you want some fractional marketing support. You might decide you've got to still pay your accountant. So I guess, when do you decide to delegate versus taking on that work yourself and maybe distracting you from what you are good at? Is it as simple as that? Like, I don't enjoy this, so I'm just going to hire somebody for it? Or is there a bit more of a strategic?
No. It's much, much, much more complex than that. So, one, for an accountant, I do my own books. So I'm paying an accountant to do taxes and advisory. That's it. I'm not paying him to cut checks. I'm not paying him to balance my checkbook and make a P&L. That I do myself. But I think it's incredibly important to be super familiar with your numbers. Where's my expenses and what's my true profit margins. It's funny because my accountant is somebody I have the cleanest books of all his people. So I'm super on top of that. So that's not a big expense, the accounting, because I'm using him to be an accountant, right? Not for bookkeeping. So it's not a monthly expense; it's an annual expense. They pay it once a year. In terms of delegating, what the way it works is, if I'm delegating out, I have to pay someone to do it. They're probably not as good as me, or at least don't have the same reputation where they can charge the same fee, right? And I don't charge exorbitant fees at all. It's very reasonable, very reasonable. So maybe I'll grab someone offshore who I know is good. I got to train them. I got to manage them, and there's overhead to that. So I got to bring someone else. I have to manage them. That costs time. Training, that costs time. Then I have to pay them.
Yep.
And then I have to mark them up to my customer, to my client. And then at the same time, they won't bill as much as I'm billing per hour, right? Generally, it's something like that. So now what happens is, I need to basically sell 3 hours or 4 hours to make the same money if I worked 1 hour. Make sense? So
Makes sense.
again, it becomes a numbers game of, I need to be able to feed my family, I need to pay my mortgage, I need to pay my rent. Can I even afford to give this out, or am I losing all this work? So if I'm going to put someone on it and they're going to work for the week, let's say, and then I'm now sitting doing nothing, that's a substantial hit to my income. A relatively small savings to the client, and potentially they're getting a lesser product, but probably not, because I'm on top of it managing it. At some point, you're charging the client for that management as well, but still, it's a smaller piece. So you need to find the balance of where you're making enough money. So hopefully I'm trying to work almost at capacity, billing 8 hours a day or something. And then at the same time, managing other people to do other work, call it spillover or whatnot. Um, that completely changes as you scale, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you need to be spending all your time management. But when you're first starting off, you're more concerned about, am I competing with myself by farming out work and then I don't have it and I'm not earning enough, right? So that's kind of the balance that you play early on, if that makes sense.
Last question on the corp piece. Any other cost of doing business that you didn't anticipate, maybe it being as much that you didn't perhaps factor in your early years, or other areas that you decided to invest in that paid off for itself, kind of thing?
If you look at my expenditures, um, by far the number one is people. That's always going to be. Um, the the second biggest cost is going to be taxes, which you can just write it off, but it's there. And then after that, it, the for me personally, the next biggest one would be data servers, which is not massive. I spend, I think, something like $1,500 a month on data servers. But that's because of the industry I'm in. Insurance, business insurance is not that much. It's a couple $100 a month. You should be aware of it. For me, I pay a lot again because I'm dealing with data, and it's a potential higher risk. So I make sure I'm covered on that. But then after that, it's really not much, right? Website hosting is $20, Zoom's $10. Maybe you have Slack. So these small SaaS services, they could add up to a few $100, but it's not a lot. By
Yeah.
all means, it's very easy to start being an independent consultant on the cheap. You don't even have to start a corporation. You can do, a 1099 straight, right?
Yeah.
And and you file, or you can open a little LLC, right? Obviously, the rules around how you can hire someone else, but again, if you're just paying them, you don't necessarily need it, as a lot of that stuff is just for protections. So yeah, cost of doing business is in the consulting space is incredibly cheap.
I think 1099 is a good way of dipping your toe into the market of what a contractor looks like, right? If you've been an FTE all your career and you're curious, I think 1099 could be a good segue before deciding if it's for you long term, or you want to go back to full time, or it buys you more time doing a contract before you land your next role.
Keep that in mind, right? All of these things have nothing to do with how many hours you put in. You can be doing it full time at the 1099, full time as corp to corp, or full time as W-2. There's this country, the United States. I mean, the United States probably had a lower stigma, but a lot of I would say in the more global sense, it's somewhat of a stigma about being independent. In the United States, it's definitely lower, but a lot of people are just terrified of it. So there is that to take into account. But at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, all of these things are just structure of how you're paid, right?
Right.
And how you're paying taxes. People say, "Oh, you have less job security as a contractor." Do you really?
In today's economy, who knows?
It's been like that for 15 years already.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say at the larger companies, if you go to more traditional, like even when I was back at Weight Watchers, right back in 2013, I was at Weight Watchers, 2012, 2013. If they had layoffs, the contractors went first,
Yeah.
right? That is true. But I still don't think you're vastly more protected.
Agreed. I'd agree with that viewpoint. A couple of questions I want to kind of almost get quick answers for, just in the closing minutes. First, obviously, is going to be AI and Salesforce. What is your current kind of couple of minute assessment on where that's at currently and where that's going for next year?
Okay, so I'm going to start with this. People have issues with Agentforce. We've heard it a lot on our podcast. At some point, I don't know when that is, Salesforce is going to get it right. The entire industry is going to get it right. Google's going to get it right. Microsoft's going to get it right. These guys are going to figure this out in terms of the best way to structure it and how it's going to work. The next question is, okay, how much are agents really going to take away? How much are they going to do? My personal perspective, and I'm not Nostradamus, and everyone gets this stuff wrong, but my personal perspective is that there is nothing that AI can really do that a deterministic algorithm couldn't, right? For the most part, if I can train a person to do it, I probably could train a deterministic algorithm, a traditional piece of code, to code it. Traditional code can automate websites. Traditional codes can automate a computer. They can. There's traditional chatbots. People forget that Einstein had Einstein chat, right? For years as part of marketing, like that stuff had been there. And there was nothing stopping them from creating an order, from parsing a PDF, right? These tools do make it a little bit easier. But I don't see this automation technological breakthrough where all of a sudden there are things that could be done that couldn't have previously. There's definitely a push towards it. So I'm somewhat skeptical that it's just going to take over everything. It's going to take over some stuff. It's hard to know what. So I mean, we're really going to see. I do think some things are just going to be super obvious, which are parsing documents into more formatted structures and then doing data entry. Like that's going to be a clear win. Any kind of thing that doctors have been doing for years and years and years. You know, I used to I get a call. Reminder, your appointment is tomorrow at 10 p.m. Please press 1 to confirm you're there, right? A lot of that stuff is being replaced with natural language type stuff. Oh, sorry, would you like to reschedule? Here's our availability. Did this work? Did that work? Right, so it's a little bit more natural. So that stuff, you might see a change there. You know, do you really see that as some kind of giant technological loop? Again, a lot of that stuff has been, has been done. So, it's going to be interesting to see where it's really, really gonna take off. I know we had people even on this podcast say it's going to completely transform reporting and dashboards. I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think, I think people who like looking at numbers and they like drilling down, and they're not going to like typing in a question. They want to see the same reports over and over again because they're looking for trends. And if it's the same report over and over again, why are they going to be typing out these questions? You have a button that says the question, right? What's my KPIs? How are my KPIs doing? That's a click. I don't need to type out a question. So there, there's going to be some kind of shift. It's hard to know exactly where it's going to hit. I don't know, and I just don't know. But I do know they're going to get this right at some point, and there are going to be some use cases for it. But where exactly it's going to land, it's going to be tough. I just don't know exactly where it is. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
Perfect, love it. And lastly, I wanted to ask you about your own recent hiring experience. You put a post on LinkedIn, and a week ago, and right now, 91 people have liked it or supported it. 24 people commented, 11 reposts. I know you had a ton of connection requests and people reaching out that weren't part of that number. I guess, what were people doing to stand out? And what were common trends that you're seeing in some of these applicants who were expressing interest in, being considered for the roles?
So you're not going to like this answer, but the number one thing people could have done to stood out was actually know me personally. So it was like, hey, Dave, though you're looking for work, glad to know you're doing well. We missed you, guess what? I'm on the market. And I'll be like, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me you're looking for a job? Catch up. And I know he's good, or I know she's good. And let me get you an interview with my partner, right?
Yeah.
Those guys immediately jump to the top of the list. it's just the way it is. I don't almost don't even have to interview them. I know I know they're good. There's a um I don't know how to describe it, but there's like a like a feel like you're giving back to the people who you've worked with in the past,
Yep.
component to that. So yeah, those guys jump to the top, and that's just how it's going to be. The next part of it is, after that, it's just, I took a quick scan of their LinkedIn. A lot of these people have a lot of really, really good experience. I was surprised by the quality of talent on the market that I got from just one little post. Um, I do think I do think there was a lot of luck in terms of the reach. I don't understand the LinkedIn algorithm. It do what the heck it wants. Um, I did cheat. I posted it in our internal Slack and asked people to like it in the first hour. So that definitely gave it a boost. I don't know by how much. Um, but yeah, I mean, it seemed to work reasonably well. We got a lot of great candidates. I was honestly surprised by some of the people. I get the level of quality of the candidates that we got back, from it. I mean, it seems to be a good time to be hiring talent,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's fortunately, I mean, there's a lot of people still ready to be hired, and a lot of companies looking to hire. So, I think we'll talk about this another time. But
Yeah,
obviously
yeah, next
LinkedIn only,
podcast.
next podcast, but obviously LinkedIn only captures the negativity around layoffs. It doesn't promote the companies that are hiring, 5, 10, 15 people, right? So I actually don't think the economy is that bad from a Salesforce hiring perspective, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail next time. But I think it's good for both candidates looking for jobs, and I think it's good for companies looking to hire. So I think that shift has come back more central. More to
Yeah,
follow, though.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm gonna love asking you all about hiring talent trends, the talent needs. Yeah, it'll be good. Our next episode, guys. Stay in touch or keep tuned.
Amazing. Well, any closing thoughts, Maz? Any other bits of advice for our listeners around setting up your own company, data migrations, publishing a book, small SIs versus boutique SIs versus enterprise SIs? We've covered a lot. So, any other closing thoughts?
Um, I will say this, like just in general, with whatever you do, life is not nearly as long as you think it is. It does not pay to deal with people who you don't want to be dealing with for the most part. Unfortunately, particularly with clients, you sometimes have to deal with difficult people, but at least if they're good people, you're going to be in a good place. Somebody once told me, I don't even remember who, that if you swim with sharks, you're going to get bit, and it's just the truth around it. So you know you got to do eventually you got to do what's right for you, what's right for your family. If that means going out on your own, that's great. Just make sure you plan it. You know how you're going to pay your bills. You know what your first year revenue is going to be. Make sure you got one or two big projects lined up. If you want to try moonlighting first, try moonlighting first, right? Feel free to to kind of try these things out. um, and there's no shame in having a full-time job, right? There's absolutely no shame in working your way up, and working with companies. You should be proud of it. And like I said, life is too short. So stay where you're happy, or find the place where you're going to be happy and have an impact. So yeah.
Love it. Thanks, Maz. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you, man. This was good. Till next time.
Till next time.